Hello, my dear friends. Recently, I've been adding to my collection of historic images with various projects in mind, and I thought today I'd make a video about some of these, which I have themed around the Central Line. Technically, the title Lost Stations of the Central Line is not accurate because most of these stations do still exist. They just look nothing like they do in these images anymore. So, enough with the furthering and the a-doing, let's have a look at them, shall we? We'll start with Shepherd's Bush. This is another of those promotional postcards put out by the Central London Railway, the company that would eventually become the Central Line. Shepherd's Bush was the original terminus of the Central Line when it opened in 1900. The architecture here is in the distinctive style of Harry Bell Measures. There aren't many of his stations that survive, although perhaps the closest example to Shepherd's Bush, both architecturally and geographically, is Holland Park. What I find quite depressing is that this building actually lasted into the 21st century. It was only demolished in 2008 as part of the redevelopment for Westfield London. These signs inside the new station are relics of the old one. In 1908, the Central London Railway was extended west in order to serve the Franco-British exhibition and the Olympic Games that took place that year. The exhibition was housed in specially constructed buildings that were painted white, which led to the area gaining the name of White City. The station built to serve it was named Wood Lane. This was a very awkward station because it was situated right next to the railway's depot. In fact, the station was so cramped that it became impossible to use the depot and the station at the same time. When longer trains were introduced in the 1920s, they blocked access to the depot when they were at the Wood Lane platform. The platform in turn had a wooden extension that had to be sort of swivelled into place when trains were using it. The whole thing was replaced by the much better designed White City in 1947. The station and the depot were demolished to make way for Westfield London again in the early 21st century. That shopping centre has a lot to answer for. That being said, the old power plant buildings do survive next to the centre. If you'd like to see what the depot looked like, it just happens that I picked up an image taken inside the carriage sheds. These trains are the 1903 stock, the first multiple units on the Central London Railway. The ones that could, just about, use the Wood Lane platform. I think the image of Wood Lane station was taken after closure. It certainly doesn't look like a busy tube station here. The mosaics above the entrance have apparently been taken down, but fortunately for us you can still see one of them. A new Wood Lane station, this time on the Hammersmith and City line, was opened in 2008. And credit where credit's due, it was opened to serve Westfield, and one of the mosaics is on display there. The next few come from Liverpool Street, which the Central London Railway seem to have been particularly keen to document. When the line was originally opened, the eastern terminus was at Cornhill, or Bank as it seems to have been renamed on opening. In 1912 they extended it to Liverpool Street, where it would meet the busiest main line service in Britain. Here's an unusual view inside the tunnels just outside Liverpool Street. This is a crossover between tracks that would have allowed trains to swap tracks after terminating here. Here is one of the escalators. These days escalators are nothing new, but the first ones were only installed on the Underground in 1911, so in 1912 they were definitely something to shout about. You can't see it very well in this picture, but note the way the balustrade sweeps off at an angle. That was a feature of early escalators, to ensure that people wouldn't get in each other's way at the end. I rather like this one taken in the ticket office. The Central London Railway liked to use white tiling in their stations to emphasise how clean their trains were. This also showed off their electric lighting to its best advantage. In those days, electric lights weren't quite as bright as they are today, so the white tiling reflected it. But again, while many stations were still lit by gas, these bulbs were a sign of modernity. I really like the slightly awkward ticket queue there. Here's the station at platform level, and I think this demonstrates what I was saying about the lighting. Even though those lights appear to be glowing brightly, they don't seem to be doing much to illuminate the platform. Maybe that's an issue with the cameras of the day. and these were the more vacuum tube lights, which were 3 times brighter than the lighting originally in use on the CLR. And there's another of the 1903 trains. Given the limitations of old cameras, I wonder if that train was actually moving, or they parked it half in the station to create the effect of a train arriving. I just would have expected it to be blurred if it was moving. I'd also like to draw your attention to that sign in the top left there. Firstly, I really miss those old signs that had the pointing finger on them. We should bring those back. But secondly, note that it talks about Liverpool Street Great Eastern Station. Well, the word great has been cut off, which ironically is not great, but it does say Great Eastern Station. The Great Eastern Railway built Liverpool Street Main Line Station in 1875, and there are still many signs of its ownership in the present-day station. The Great Eastern Railway ceased to exist in 1923 when it became part of the London and North Eastern Railway. In 1946, the Central Line was extended eastward again. This was part of the New Works programme. The Central Line was to take over the main line railways to Ongar and Fairlop. To do so, they would have to dig a tunnel from Liverpool Street to Stratford, and that's what's happening here. A bunch of fellas digging into the end wall at Liverpool Street, no doubt wondering if anybody else is going to show up or it's just them. But the takeover was about more than just tunnels. The railway and the stations along it would require modernisation. This image shows Newbury Park, which was originally another Great Eastern Railway station. It was rebuilt and reopened as a tube station in 1947. The most distinctive feature of Newbury Park has to be its award-winning bus shelter out the front. Clearly London Transport were pretty proud of it. In fact, I believe this photo may have originated as one of their publicity shots. And finally, here we are at what's now the end of the Central Line, Epping. Now, while Epping is the end of the line these days, between 1949 and 1994 the line continued on to Ongar. The Epping-Ongar section was really weird. It was kind of its own separate thing, and this photo demonstrates that. When London Underground took it over, they decided at first not to bother electrifying it. Instead, they hired a locomotive and 2 coaches from British Railways, which they considered sufficient to take care of the relatively few passengers who used that section. Those large windows on the back of the train are because this is an auto train. Basically, there was a cab at the back where the driver could sit and remotely control the locomotive. This meant that the locomotive wouldn't have to run around the train at the end of the line. The whole thing could just shuttle back and forth. In 1957, the bosses relented and electrified the section, but for the most part it still operated as a separate thing, with a half-length shuttle train between Epping and Ongar. My autocorrect keeps trying to change Ongar to Ontario, so just to be clear, the Central Line has never gone to Ontario. Maybe it should. Anyway, in 1994 the Epping-Ongar line was closed, the service to be replaced by buses. It's now the Epping-Ongar Heritage Railway, so once again it is possible to take a steam train from Ongar. Unfortunately, it no longer goes all the way to Epping, but who knows what the future holds. If there's one thing that this collection of images demonstrates, it's that change is a constant. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this pictorial tale from the tube. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like, as always, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your always appreciated support. You are the visual record to my changing station. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.